I woke up screaming because in my dream, the fire reached me before the pain did. My throat was raw when my eyes flew open, the sound of my own voice still echoing in the bedroom like a siren that had nowhere left to go. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me, its soft click 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 marking time that no longer felt like mine. My hands were clenched into fists so tight my nails had cut half moons into my palms. It took a few seconds to remember where I was. Our bedroom. The pale gray walls Jacob had painted himself one summer weekend. The faint smell of lavender from the diffuser I used to sleep with when I was pregnant. Pregnant. The word still rose in me like a reflex. Even though my body knew better now, I turned my head to the other side of the bed. Empty. Cold. The sheet wrinkled where Jacob should have been, as if he left in a hurry and didn't bother smoothing the space he abandoned. Again, I pressed my hand to my stomach out of habit, then froze when the emptiness answered back. That hollow, aching silence inside me had become the loudest thing I lived with. In the dream, I was trapped in the car, the smell of gasoline sharp in my nose, the dashboard lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. I was screaming his name, Jacob. Jacob, while the heat crawled closer, licking the edges of my skin. And in the dream, just like in real life, I watched him run, not away from the fire, away from me. I swung my legs over the side of the bed and sat there, breathing through the aftershocks. My bare feet touched the hardwood floor, cool and grounding. Somewhere down the hall, I heard the low hum of Jacob's voice on the phone. Soft, concerned, the voice he used when he was being gentle with someone who wasn't me. I didn't have to guess who it was. Whitney. She was always Whitney now, never my childhood friend anymore, never just a name spoken in passing. She had become a presence that lived in our house without ever stepping foot inside it. Her needs, her fears, her soft, trembling voice that could pull Jacob from anywhere, even from the wreckage of his own life. I stood slowly, my knees stiff, my body still learning how to move without the extra weight it had carried for months. As I padded toward the bathroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror at the end of the hall. I barely recognized her. My hair hung dull and loose around my face, eyes sunken, skin sallow in the unforgiving overhead light. I looked like someone who had survived something she never got to talk about. In the bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and gripped the edge of the sink. My chest tightened as another image rose, uninvited. The hospital room. All white and sterile. The steady beep of machines that couldn't save what I had lost. A nurse's voice, kind but careful. A doctor who wouldn't meet my eyes when he said, "I'm sorry." Sorry felt like such a small word for something that big. When I came back into the hallway, Jacob's voice drifted toward me again. I could hear just enough. "Did you take the medicine I sent over?" he asked quietly. "Whit, you have to take care of yourself. You're not alone, okay? I'm here." I leaned against the wall, my shoulder pressing into the cool paint, and closed my eyes. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was there, just not here. Before all of this, before the accident, before the fire, before Whitney became a constant shadow, our life had been simple in the way that feels solid when you're standing inside it. Jacob and I had been married for 7 years. We weren't flashy or loud or dramatic. We were routines and shared glances, inside jokes whispered over morning coffee. He used to kiss my temple every night before bed. A small, absent-minded gesture that somehow meant everything. We had planned this baby carefully. I remembered the night I told him, the way his face had gone still before breaking into a smile so wide it scared me. He had lifted me off the ground, laughing, spinning me around our tiny kitchen while I told him to be careful. Careful. Even then, those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. I went back into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, pulling a cardigan around my shoulders. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding its breath. On my nightstand was the small wooden box where I kept the ultrasound photos. I hadn't opened it in weeks. I told myself it was because I was healing, because I was giving myself space. The truth was simpler. I was afraid of what would happen if I let myself look. The accident had happened on a rainy Thursday evening. We were driving home from my prenatal appointment, arguing gently about baby names. The road was slick, the sky already darkening. Jacob's phone rang, and I saw Whitney's name flash on the screen. He frowned, answered it, and his whole body changed in seconds. "She says she's having stomach pains," he told me, his voice tight. "She's scared." I remember saying, "Jacob, we're almost home." And then the world tilted. Headlights, the sound of metal screaming, heat, and Jacob unbuckling his seatbelt before the car even stopped moving. "I'll get help," he said, already reaching for the door. "Whitney needs me." That was the last thing he said to me before the explosion. After that, everything came in pieces. Pain, darkness, waking up alone. And now, months later, I sat in the same house, alive but altered, listening to my husband give comfort to another woman while my own grief settled deeper into my bones. I told myself this was temporary, that people grieve differently, that Jacob was just trying to do the right thing. But even then, a quiet voice inside me whispered something I wasn't ready to hear. Some abandonments don't happen all at once. They happen slowly, in moments you excuse, until one day you look around and realize you've been left behind. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling fan until my breathing evened out. Somewhere, Jacob laughed softly at something Whitney said, and the sound cut deeper than any scream ever could. That was the night I realized my nightmare hadn't ended when I woke up. It had just learned how to follow me into the light. Some days, Jacob and I existed in the same house but lived in completely different worlds. Our mornings once held a quiet rhythm, coffee brewing, soft laughter over breakfast, the way our hands found each other across the kitchen table. Now, mornings felt like walking through a fog. I'd wake up first and watch him move around the house like a ghost, texting endlessly on his phone, his eyes flickering with worry and something else I couldn't quite place. Most of the time, he was on calls, soft voices, whispered reassurances. The name Whitney was never far from his lips. "She's like a sister to me," he repeated whenever I confronted him. "You have to understand, Sienna." But understanding was a language I no longer spoke. Jacob was so focused on Whitney that I felt invisible in the spaces we shared. He paid her rent when she missed payments. He sent money to her mother to help out. He even bought her groceries on his way home from work. Groceries I'd been asking for weeks because my appetite was gone, and I couldn't face the supermarket. Each gesture felt like a betrayal wrapped in concern. One evening, I came home earlier than usual, hoping to surprise Jacob with dinner. The house was dark, except for the soft glow of his laptop in the study. I knocked on the doorframe. "Jacob?" He didn't look up at first, his face tight with concentration. Then he smiled, one of those tired, distracted smiles that made my heart twist. "Hey, Sienna. How was your day?" "Long," I said, setting the bag of takeout on the desk. "I made your favorite Thai noodles." He glanced at the food, then back at his screen, where a video call window was open. I noticed Whitney's face pale, flushed, clutching her stomach. "Whitney," Jacob said softly. "Are you okay?" The moment stretched, and I swallowed the lump forming in my throat. I could see Whitney wince and press her hand over her abdomen. Jacob's voice dropped to a whisper, and I saw his hand twitch like he wanted to reach through the screen. "Okay, I'm coming over. Don't move." I closed the door quietly and slipped away before he could see the hurt on my face. That night, Jacob didn't come to bed until well after midnight. When he finally did, I asked him gently, "Do you ever miss us?" He looked at me like I'd asked something strange. "I'm here, aren't I?" But I wasn't sure if he meant the house or me. The first real crack came when I noticed the bills. Jacob had been sending money to Whitney's landlord for months. I found the statements in a folder marked miscellaneous. I didn't open it at first. Ignorance felt safer. But curiosity painful. Relentless curiosity won. Whitney wasn't just like a sister anymore. She was someone Jacob was actively supporting while I was left to count the cost of our lost future. One Saturday afternoon, I finally confronted him. "We can't keep pretending this is normal," I said, holding the stack of bills in my hands like a dam about to burst. "You're giving her money, rent, groceries, everything. What about me? What about us?" Jacob's eyes flashed with frustration, but also something closer to guilt. "She's pregnant, Sienna. She's scared. Alone. I'm the only one she has." I wanted to scream at him, to shake him until he remembered what we lost the baby, the life we planned together. But instead, I said something quieter, more raw. "Is she really pregnant?" Jacob's jaw tightened. Yes, that was the first lie. For weeks, I held on to that question like a secret poison. Whitney's pregnancy became the center of our fractured world. Jacob's attention was always there. Messages, calls, visits. Whitney was fragile, vulnerable, the woman Jacob chose over me again and again. One night, I stayed up late, scrolling through pictures on Whitney's social media. The photos showed her smiling, holding her belly in staged maternity shots, posting updates about mommy groups and baby showers. But something about the timing felt off. I dug deeper, piecing together dates and posts, talking quietly to people I barely knew who had crossed paths with Whitney. The more I found, the heavier the weight in my chest became. Whitney was lying. She wasn't pregnant at all. The truth hit me like a fist in the gut. Whitney had manipulated Jacob, exploited his weakness, gambled that his loyalty to her would break what little was left of my marriage. But the final, brutal betrayal was worse. One rainy evening, months after the accident, I discovered something I never expected. Whitney had caused the crash. She had called Jacob that night, pretending to be in distress, knowing he would leave me alone in the car. She had set the trap, and Jacob had fallen right into it. When I confronted Jacob, he didn't deny it. "I didn't know what else to do," he whispered. She needed me. I wanted to scream. Instead, I felt something harden inside me, the last thread of love snapping free. I gathered every piece of evidence I could find. Texts, bank statements, social media posts, witnesses who had seen Whitney's deception. I filed for divorce and started the legal battle to reclaim the money Jacob had lavished on Whitney. All of it paid with our joint funds, money that should have belonged to the family we once dreamed of building. The courtroom was cold and clinical, but the weight of the truth settled like fire in my chest. Whitney's lies came undone under cross-examination. Her carefully crafted story crumbled into nothing more than desperation and greed. When Whitney staged a fake suicide attempt to silence me, I didn't flinch. I called her bluff. Jacob was horrified. The man who once stood beside me, now shattered by his own choices. I've given you countless chances. I told him the day the divorce was finalized. My voice was calm but firm, each word carrying the weight of years of pain. The one who hurt me has always been you. Your wavering heart killed our child. He didn't say a word. There was nothing left to say. After the divorce papers were signed, the house felt emptier than it ever had, even with no one left but me. I sat on the worn-out couch in the living room, the soft hum of the air conditioner mixing with the occasional creak of the old wood floor. It was the first time I really noticed the silence, thick and heavy, pressing into every corner. Jacob was gone. Whitney was exposed and humiliated. But I was still here, broken and raw, carrying the scars no one could see. For weeks, I floated through the days like a ghost. Grief was no longer sharp, it had settled into a dull ache that made everything feel distant. I stopped checking my phone, stopped answering calls from friends who wanted to check on me. I was tired of pretending to be okay. But slowly, the dull ache started to change. It was in small moments, a cup of coffee brewed just the way I liked it, the way the morning light spilled across the kitchen floor, the scent of fresh laundry that reminded me life went on. I started going back to work, not because I was ready, but because I needed something to hold on to. My career in graphic design had always been a steady refuge. The hum of creativity and deadlines gave me purpose beyond the heartbreak. One afternoon, Charles, my colleague, noticed me lingering by the window, staring out at the rain. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. He didn't push. Instead, he offered a quiet companionship that felt different from what I'd known. Charles wasn't the kind of man who spoke in grand gestures or dramatic promises. He listened, really listened, without judgment. Over time, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Hope. Jacob, meanwhile, was a man unraveling. He sold his company, the business we had built together, and disappeared from the circles we once moved in. Rumors circulated that he'd used the money to open an orphanage in a distant town, a place where children who had nowhere else could find care and love. I didn't know what to make of it at first. Part of me wanted to see it as penance, a way for him to make amends for the damage he'd caused. But deep down, I understood the complexity of regret. It wasn't a salve. It was a burden that would never fully lift. Years passed. I rebuilt my life slowly but surely. Charles and I grew closer, grounded in honesty and mutual respect. He never tried to replace what I lost. He simply stood beside me as I found strength in myself again. One afternoon, I was walking through a small park near my office when I saw him. Jacob. He looked older, worn, his eyes carrying the weight of years spent in remorse. He stopped when he saw me, hesitation flickering across his face. "Sienna," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I studied him for a long moment before speaking. "I'm sorry for everything," he said, voice cracking. "For leaving you, for everything with Whitney. I was a fool. I lost myself in you." I felt no rush of anger or bitterness. Those emotions had lived inside me for so long, but now they felt distant, like a storm that had finally passed. "I won't forgive you," I said quietly, "but I won't hate you either." That was the truth. I had moved beyond the rage and pain that had threatened to swallow me. I chose peace, my own peace. Jacob nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. We didn't say more. I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels clicking against the pavement, a steady beat to a life reclaimed. The days that followed that encounter felt strangely light, like a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying had finally lifted. I thought about Jacob often, not with bitterness, but with a quiet sorrow for the man he had become and the man he might have been. Life, I realized, wasn't about perfect endings. It was about the hard, messy middle where we learned who we really were. Charles and I continued to build something beautiful, not a replacement for what I lost, but a new story with its own rhythm. He was patient, steady, the kind of man who noticed the small things. How I liked my tea, the way I twirled my hair when I was nervous, the pause I took before telling a painful story. One evening, as we sat on our balcony, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline, Charles took my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said softly. I squeezed his hand, the warmth spreading through me like a balm. I'm proud of me too, I admitted. Because I was. Sometimes, I think back to that night of the accident, the way the world tilted. The fire that burned away so much more than just metal and glass. It was a loss that reshaped me, but it didn't define me. Grief is complicated. It doesn't disappear. It becomes part of who we are. And forgiveness? It isn't always about the other person. Sometimes, it's the gift we give ourselves. I don't pretend that I'm completely healed. There are moments when the memories flood in, unbidden and sharp. But I've learned to carry them without letting them break me. Before I close, I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt abandoned by someone you loved? Or betrayed in a way that shook you to your core? How did you find your way back to yourself? We all have our stories, our battles, our moments where we think we might never heal. But maybe, just maybe, healing isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to live anyway. If my story touched you, if you've been where I've been, I invite you to share your journey in the comments below. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is simply speak our truth. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with me through this story. Life sometimes feels like a series of impossible choices. And love, the kind that's supposed to be our safe place, can turn into the hardest lesson of all. I shared this story not because it's unique, but because it's real. Because I know many of you have felt the sting of betrayal, the hollow ache of loss, and the long, slow climb toward peace. Healing isn't linear. It's messy. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes loud, but it's always worth it. So, I want to leave you with this. How do you find peace after someone you trusted breaks you? Is forgiveness something you think you can give? Or is it something you hold for yourself? If you're comfortable, please share your thoughts or stories in the comments. Your voice matters, and maybe it will help someone else who's struggling to find their way. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories that hold space for the complicated, beautiful, painful truths of life, please subscribe and support the channel. Remember, you're never alone in your struggles. There is strength in sharing, and hope in every new beginning. Thank you for listening, and take care of yourself.